Forest tree seedlings at home. And if you give me your email address, I will have one of these in your mailbox tomorrow. Right? And I could be. And the sad part about this is, if you want to, you can look this up on Amazon, and they'll sell it for you for $10. And it's University of Idaho U.S. Forest Service. It was a government document, and somebody copied it, and you can get it electronically. But you know, the more I give them away, the more I'm just saying, you know, your dollars paid for this, and it's essentially how to raise seedlings at home. And it's written by a principal author, is a guy named Tom Landis. And Tom Landis comes to the Kenai Peninsula every year. And he comes and he fishes silver salmon lodge. You can find him there during silver season. And it's like, you know, here's the guy that wrote all these books on how to, and he's got a series of them. And they're essentially he wrote the book on how to run tree nurseries. And this is a growing in your backyard. And this is like, if you're going to grow 10,000 trees in your backyard. So we're going to just tune this down, but it all works the same way. So please try, somebody can pass it around. So it all starts with seed, and I was just out, actually, well, let me apologize first. All right, shouldn't apologize, but I will. It was my intent to come here with stuff to hand out and we could play. And this year I organized myself, and I took all of my containers and I put them in the greenhouse, and I took all of my soil medium that I put them in the greenhouse, and I took all of my amendments and put them in the greenhouse. And now there is snow that is this high from the greenhouse to my driveway. And I started thinking about it, and I said, I am not going to dig that out. And then I looked at the door, and I said, you know, I don't think that door will open because the greenhouse has so much snow on it. I think it's kind of racked it a little bit. So, sorry, the best I could do was this, because I have about 50 of them in my other garage. So, and that's a tree container. So it starts with seed. So I had a great idea that I was going to go collect some seed, and everybody's going to say, where do you get seed? And it says seed is everywhere. Right, except for in front of this building, because I thought I could go out there today and go find some seed, but no, they actually do a good job sweeping here. They must pay somebody, because in every crook or cranny around your house, go about where your deck is. If you have a little groove where 2 boards is, you have tree seeds in there. And the tree seeds you're going to see are mostly birch and spruce. So let's say you've done a great job and you swept right? You can get seed again this spring when the snow melts off of your roof, and put like a bucket next to your roof gutter outlet, and it's going to fill with seed, because your roof is catching seed. When all that snow melts, it'll melt and it'll put seed, and then the flush will actually, and you can get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of seed off of your roof. And that's really important. That's really good seed. It's better than the seed you can. Or you can go out, and I was doing this in the woods until we had this last snow, and you go find little tiny seeds sprinkled all over the snow. They're you see them everywhere. They're like that big. And you see these little spots. And if you see one that's that big and it's black, that's a spruce seed. And if it's tan, it's a birch seed. So that's so. And if you have white spruce and black spruce, don't worry about it. The tree is going to be about this tall by the time you can figure out if you got a black or white spruce. But it's a tree. So you can actually go find your favorite spruce tree, take a pail, dig a hole, and wait for that snow to melt, and you will find seed in it. So you can get seed. You can purchase seed. I tried to get a tablespoon of seed, which would have been enough seed for all of you, but the state research center in Palmer never returned my phone calls for the past 2 weeks. So anyway, we won't go with what's going on at the state research center. So seeds are where you start. You can buy seeds online if somebody wants. There's a couple of places. Just look up tree seeds for sale, and I'll send that with a list of these sites where you can buy some. You want to buy some redwoods seeds? You can buy some redwood seed. Yeah, and those people are doing it all of the time. The young, who's the arborist, the guy that has the tree business? His last name is Young. His wife's name is Jessica. He shows up here. They show up here every so often. So anyway, his wife, since they're removing trees, decided that a good angle for their business was for every tree that they remove from somebody's home, they'll give them some seedlings. It's a nice. Jessica was a realtor, by the way, so she knows about the whole selling part. And she grew all kinds of trees last year, and she had a disaster. They all died. And we'll talk about why her trees died. So let me ask, how many of you garden? Okay, just about everybody gardens. Anybody grow tomatoes? Sort of, you try, So, but it's about the same. And so you're off to a good start. That you need a seed and you need some soil and you need but once you get to a tree, other things start happening. And so we'll start with seed. When you have seed, if you take birch seed off of a tree or after it falls, you have to treat it. And that's why, and you treat it through cold stratification. So you take this, and how I would do it when I would get seed from, let's say, a vendor outside, I take it, I get some paper towel, I sprinkle the seed on it, I put another paper towel on top, I wet it down, I roll it up, and I put it in the fridge. And then I take it out a couple days later, I unroll it, I wash it. Do this a couple times for a week. Then I take it and I put it in the freezer. Leave it in the freezer for a week, take it out. And you just kind of just mix and match this. And what you're doing is you're duplicating what happens to a seed in nature. And most forest tree seeds in northern latitudes need that cold, damp, warm, cold, damp, warm, cold, damp, warm. And you won't make them, and that, you'll take a birch seed, which will have like 10% germination on a birch seed. And this is a birch seed looks like a tomato seed, except about half of the size. And you'll have 10% germination, and if you do that cold stratification, you'll bring it up to 90%. So if you have 10% germination and you want to plant a tree in here, you're going to have to put 10 seeds on this to get one. But if you have 90, you put 2. All right, just hedge your bet, put 3. and you're going to get much better because, one of the things with raising tree seedlings from scratch is you don't want to redo your work over. You want to just be as efficient as you can. So you stratify your seed. So if you go out and find in your roof gutter some seed, it's been stratified. It's been in the snow, it's been in the cold, it's been wet by the wind and drunk by the snow, as the song goes, by the way. It's that Little Feat song, and I won't sing it. So it's all about the seed. So the next thing you need is soil. And this is where tomatoes and trees kind of depart. So how many of you, when you do seedlings, do you get potting mix? Right, and that's you can do potting mix. What isn't a good thing to do is to use soil, because soil is, number one, heavy. And what you're doing when you're doing seedlings, just like you're growing tomatoes in your house, you're going to put it in some of that potting mix. You're going to put the seed, you're going to cover it, and then you're going to want to grow this. And in your house, you want to grow these things as fast as you can. And that's because you want them to be planted out into your garden at a good size. And if they're too small, we're really pushing it here, growing tomatoes. But with tree seedlings, in nature, you're only going to grow in 1 year, your tree seedling from, naturally in the forest will only grow an inch or so. But if you do a tree nursery, growing it from seed, you can grow a seedling into about 6 inches in 6 months. And that's but only this big to 6 inches. And if you really push them, put them under lights, make sure they're warm, water them daily, you might get 8 inches in that. And that's what growing a tree from reforestation standpoint. And they do this commercially, millions of trees in grow houses. So you need the soil, and imagine having some of these, and you have 20 of these, and these all weigh about a pound. You have 20 of these, that's 20 pounds. But if you use a potting mix, they're much lighter. And I have a mix of potting soil that I use. What I do is I'm real cheap, by the way, except the supply chain messed with me the past 2 years because I couldn't get, you buy sphagnum moss and you buy vermiculite and you mix it yourself, right? Or you can go, I don't want to go to Trinity Greenhouse, one of those people that is not sponsoring us, but we hope they will eventually someday. But you can buy the Masters mix they have, and they essentially have this mix. And I think they add nutrients to it too, which is really, really good. So, but you mix, and I use like 2 parts sphagnum to a half a part to 2/3 of a part of perlite. And you do that because the sphagnum kind of clumps up and it lays flat and it becomes mucky. Oh.
Did you say vermiculite?
Yeah.
Earlier and
They're about the same. When you go try to buy a 25-pound bag of it you at Home Depot, you get what they have. So I like.
It helps aerate the soil.
Yeah.
Vermiculite helps hold in the moisture too, doesn't it?
Yep, vermiculite, but it also keeps it keeps it aerated too. It just breaks up because you want to have soil. Our soil here is so compact. That's why our little seedlings don't grow so fast, by the way, because they're that fine textured lush soil they have that cakes up and kind of turns into concrete when it dries out, which is, so you want to have, and then you want to do amendments to it. And in this book, they talk about everything you need. I have a mix that I use. I'll use this because I got to hang on to something. It's from what they use at the UAF greenhouse, and it sounds like I'm giving a chemistry class. You know, you have some nitrogen, and you have some phosphorus, and you have some right potassium, and then you put some lime in it because, you know, yes, everything's going to be pretty acidic because you got the sphagnum. But so you lime it to bring it down, and you put 2 types of lime. You put dolomite lime because that gives you magnesium, and it's a whole cookbook. Or you can go buy a general fertilizer at Home Depot and mix that in there too. One of the things that's really important, and I tell folks, if you're doing seedlings, just like you're doing tomatoes, get yourself some slow-release fertilizer because your tomatoes are only going to be growing. Ben, when do you plant tomatoes? Do you plant tomatoes in Alaska?
Start maybe late March, April.
Late March, April, and then you plant them out in.
It really depends.
Yeah.
On how good your greenhouse is.
Yeah. So 3 months. Not 2 months maybe. Yeah. The seedlings, you're going to keep these in there for 6 months, even 7 months, 8 months. And the problem becomes is when you put fertilizer in your soil, the tree is going to consume all that fertilizer, and then you're going to have trees. And that's what happened to the youngs, is that they were treating it like it was a tomato plant, and next thing you know, their trees are turning yellow, and they're turning funky colors, and they're turning purple, and those were all nutrient deficiencies because the trees have a much greater dependent. Yeah, they need more fertilizer than what you could put in them. And what I do when I grow seedlings, and I've done them by seed. Now I don't do them anymore, and that's going to be this. We're going to diverge from that. But some of these tips you can use in your tomato gardening too, if you want to do that. That slow release. It takes like 2 tablespoons to a gallon of mix that. Essentially Osmocote. And then the other thing from tomato growers, there's this tomato mix thing, this micronutrient mix. And so you got all this vermiculite and you got this sphagnum. Well, where's your iron? Because trees need iron, trees need sulfur, they need all those. And typically when you're growing tomatoes, you're only going to have them for a little while, and then you're going to put them in a soil in a garden that will have those micronutrients. But doing 6 months in a tube like this, you have to think about those micronutrients. And you buy again, I buy this stuff. It costs me $10. It lasts me 3 or 4 years. It's not that much, but those are the ones where you get all those things that are on the periodic table, and they're further down. And for that time, because this is their home for essentially, artificially, it might be 2 or 3 years of their life. You're going to try to grow them to a 2 or 3 year old seedling in your 6 months. So you're really pushing them. The other thing is when you fill these up, there's a whole process you do this, and maybe we'll do another one of these in the spring, is you put them in, you mix it all up. I can show you how to mix this stuff. It's like where the old people used to mix concrete before they had concrete mixers. There's a whole way we use it with a grain shovel on a concrete floor, and you turn it all in and put water in it. And it's a third world thing. And it's a very cathartic. You just sit there with all your stuff and you mix it all up. And then you put some earbuds on and you listen to music and you just mix by hand until your back hurts, and then you change and you go the other way around by just mixing it and just scoop, put it in the middle, add some more water, go around the other way. So my wife thinks I'm crazy, by the way. And then I just save myself a whole bunch of money on potting mix. But it's got what I want in it, and that's kind of the important thing. So you pull them in, and one of the things you don't ever want is you don't want to have air pockets, because this stuff is kind of goopy. And you notice when you're doing your little containers, you have to make sure that you don't pack it down too hard, and you want to make sure there's no gaps. And the reason you want gaps is you want to be able to pull this out when planting day comes. And if you have air pockets, then the roots won't hold your root mass together. You want to be able to pull them out and see, and it's supposed to stay right up. And that's when you know it's the perfect time to plant. And I'll continue with that. So when you pull them out and you see that your roots are now filling up the whole cone, but the minute you see the roots are starting to curl around it, that is when you've reached the maximum of your cell. And that's kind of what dictates when you can pull them out and plant them. So you want to have a full, and if you take them out too early, you're going to pull the seedling out, and then the soil's going to fall, and you're going to have all those micro roots, which is these really fine little guys and gals that if they die, the tree is set back again. I mean, it's all about putting them in the ground on the, like they're racing downhill really fast, and then you want to put them in the ground so they have the energy to go back up on the other side. So that's an important part of that. So now when you go out and seed it, everybody thinks about planting beans, but in nature, the tree seeds are not buried in the soil. They lay on top. And that's why you take a little stick and you pat it down flat, and you put 3 seeds on the top, and then you can cover them with something, right? I'll take shredded leaves, and then one of the problems I have is, anybody ever had a problem with dampening off with your seedlings? It's when your seedling grows up, and all of a sudden, where the seed hits the, I'm going to draw this. See, it's much easier. So you can. So here's your cell, right? And that's round. And oh, by the way, and then you leave not exactly. You leave for every cell you have, one of those containers, you leave the same amount of airspace on the edge. And you do that so that you can, when you water your seedlings, you fill it up. And then every seedling gets the exact same amount of water. And then that way, if you have many of these, they're all going to be the same height. Because if you water one too much, then it'll be different than the one. And this is commercial production here. You want them to be uniform. It makes it easier. But when you're optimizing your growth, and then you can say, oh, I'm overwatering, I'm underwatering. So you lay the seed down right there. You put 3 of them. And you layer them with something. You can take shredded leaves, just sprinkle on top, and then you water them. But what I do now is I take chicken grit. Go over to Cadre, a little chicken grit goes a long ways. And you can use it for your tomato plants too. Or you can get The traction cement, traction sand, not traction. There's sand that you buy in bags, and except it's really small pebbles. Right, it's traction grit as opposed to traction sand. Yeah, yeah. One is sand, and the other one is little round rocks. And that's what they use in Fairbanks. If anybody's been up in Fairbanks, they don't put sand on the roads in Fairbanks. They put grit on it because it lasts longer, doesn't blow away. And what that does is it prevents, here's your little seedling, is dampening off is a fungus that occurs on the soil, and it will actually girdle your seedling. And so if you're doing like flowers, or if you're doing tomatoes or peppers, I put that chicken grit or that traction sand, and I put one layer, not two layers, because this little seedling is going to put a root down, and it's going to try to lift itself through there. So you just put one layer of sand. Another very calming thing to do, it's very zen with your little envelope, and you just sprinkle a little bit of sand, and you do each one. I can't wait for spring, by the way. I really enjoy that. And when you look at that, whenever you wet that grit, and if you ever notice that when water hits a stone in your driveway, that it dries really fast, that the ground will still be wet from because it has organic matter around it, but the top of that stone will actually dry because it evaporates quicker. And that stone absorbs some heat too. So that prevents water it makes the surface around that little seedling not be damp, even though the soil underneath will have lots of water. So that's how you prevent dampening off, and you'll notice it'll look like that. It'll be black. It's a real bummer when you start seeing dampening off. And you can put a fan on it to help too, especially if you have 1 million seedlings or 100 seedlings that you spent all this time packing them down, mixing the soil. So you grow it to that size. And as the tree grows, it's going to go up, and the tree will grow up. But it will immediately start sending these roots. And you, like I said earlier, you want this to go to fill up the whole cell. And the reason I have these is that somebody was doing a research project up in Palmer, and they were going to grow some funky plants, and they bought these really big. These are 2-inch diameters, and these are 9 inches deep. And when you go transplant trees in the wild, remember how we did that I told you that in a wild tree, the roots really don't go more than 6 inches deep because it is too cold. This is too cold. That's just right. Just right. So they had these, and what they found out that when I grow trees in these now, and what I do is, just to save on potting soil, I fill the bottom up with like styrofoam plugs. So I only have 6 inches. And because I'm really cheap and I don't want to use all of that potting mix. And what happens if you plant a whole thing in there, because you'll get the whole tree to grow there, is that when you plant it and you dig it up, and the sign of a true gardener is somebody that kills plants. If you're not killing plants, you're not pushing yourself as a gardener. That's my agronomist friend was kind of telling me. You tried something and it failed, you are a master gardener by planting things that fail, because you are experimenting. And now you're going to find a way to get that kohlrabi to survive, then you can, or that funky tomato. So one of the things that I like to do when I was working as a commercial or as a federal forester is I'd go out in these planting sites, and I would find trees that didn't survive, and I would dig them up. It's like, oh, this tree died. It's like, well, why didn't? And then, it's like doing a what do you call that? Autopsy? Yeah, doing an autopsy of a tree. I mean, I'm always digging them up, and you see what happened. You'll see that you planted trees here. And we'll go back to you plant trees and it's dead, and then you find out that the tree is planted that way. It's got a J root. Somebody had a tree and didn't make sure that root was, and this tree grew up and it got confused and it spiraled and it did all kinds of things. And the tree dies because it got J rooted. Or somebody went and hit a rock, they kind of at 3 inches down. So it's nice to see how, or remember how I said they would spiral? Right, and I have some trees that did that. I've planted some trees, and I said, what I'm going to do, I'll plant them anyway. And you come back 4 years later, and this thing is only 2 inches taller, and you dig it up, and these roots never left the shape that it was in, because you programmed it to. It's already on the verge of spinning, and it's going to continue spinning until, because this is really nice. This is like living at home as a teenager, and this here is like living outside your house alone without, all the creature comforts of having mom and dad taking care of you. It's you want them to go and prosper, like we want all our kids to prosper, and then start spreading roots right out of that. So once you plant your tree, all right, we'll go back to this. Is what I do is I put clear plastic, like sheathing over it. And then that way this becomes a little micro greenhouse. And every day, because I water them every day, I take my plastic sheathing and I water them. And if you have 20 of them all next to each other, it only takes a couple of minutes. And you can water them quick every day. You fill it up and you walk away, you put the sheathing. And then I put light over it, or a fluorescent. By the way, we'll put a little light bulb thing here. That's a light bulb, another heat lamp. And if you have old style fluorescents at your house, those are wonderful because they give off heat. And if you have LEDs, they don't give off heat. So find those old fluorescent and put a fluorescent lamp over them and keep them on 24/7. And that tree is going to be every day in there under the perfect temperature with the perfect amount of water, and you'll germinate these in about a week. And then once they start growing, then it becomes the hard part. This is the hardest part for most people, I think, and for me too, is you now have 3 seedlings coming out of the pot. And it's time to make a decision because you can't keep them all in there. So I'm really, really just into this. So I take a knife and I slice these little guys out and transplant them. And that's how I get in trouble. It's a good thing I don't grow marijuana because I'd be in jail now. But I do this with tomatoes, and all I really need is 6 tomato plants. And then I put 3 seeds in each, and then so eventually I end up with 12 tomato plants because of that, and it's just, and my wife says, why do we have so many tomato plants? Or you can do what the pros do and they just kill them. But I figure if you put all this time in them, you might as well. But you have to have some extra cells, and usually there's a couple that don't make that 30%. And then you keep putting the lights on them, 24/7, and you don't stop putting lights onto them until you can get them outdoors. And as long as the day is growing longer, the trees are going to continue to grow. And about the second week of June, or the second week of July, the days start growing shorter, and the tree stops growing. So, actually, they stop growing taller, by the way. At that point, they're getting ready for the upcoming winter. If you're in a greenhouse, you can just push a summer solstice back just by making sure the lights are on. And you can keep them in your greenhouse for 9 months if you want. Or you can go out and outplant them. I said that these guys here, these are 9 inches. All you really need is a 6-inch cell, and you can grow an 8-inch tree. You can go a little bit bigger than that. That is, and I had those little ones you grow tomatoes in, right? Those are only 4. You really are only going to be able to grow a 4 or 5-inch tree in those. Yeah. Anybody have any questions? I need to take a water break here. Somebody's got. I'm not that good, so.
So a tree stops growing in height after summer solstice?
Yep. And then what it does, it continues. It'll stop. Here's the sun. It's like height of the day. It will continue to grow in girth. And I have a demo I'm going to try to do at the Kenai River Festival. Ben and I work at the Watershed Forum. We're going to try to do a show and tell on tree rings. That's one of the things I kind of want to do. Ben hasn't heard about this plan I have yet, but I'm calling it under the tree canopy. We're going to have speakers and demonstrations in a tent that is decorated with trees. Right, the ambiance is to bring spruce boughs and cottonwood branches into a confined area and have everybody sit on tree rounds. And then we'll have the whole thing with it, and I'll even try to get beetles in there so we can even have the beetles in there too at the same time. But one of the things is tree rings. And you ever notice, this is a little side note, but you ever notice that with tree rings, we're going to zoom in here to this. We're going to go right up here. That the tree ring has a dark and a light. And then there's a dark and a light, and a dark and a light. And if you've ever noticed that, there's like a darker brown, a lighter brown. Everything in the lighter brown is what the tree grew before the summer solstice. And then the dark, which is always more narrow, is what the tree grew after the summer solstice. And that's how they can use tree rings to predict or describe past season events. Yeah.
If you started this tree inside your house
Yep.
for 6 months, when would be the ideal time to put it outside? You don't want it to freeze.
You don't want
you
it
wait
to
too late.
Right.
And does that tree need the process of
Yes.
less sunlight?
It needs to go down. So ideally, you'd like to have your tree taking and planting it by the middle of July. And then you put it in the ground, and then the tree's only job is to collect nutrients and put on some girth and put on some roots, because it's always growing roots, to prepare it to carry it over into the next season. And what it does to it, it sets bud. You'll start seeing little tiny buds that are going to show up. I like. You'll look at your tree, and you'll have needles. And then all of a sudden you start seeing it. And look, and this happens on all trees. You'll see these little buds are forming. Like in July, you'll start seeing them at the end of July, these little nubs. And that's the branch bud, or if it's a larch tree. This is more like a larch tree. But those little nubs are the branches for next year. So that when springtime comes, it has a bud, it'll be fully formed, it will burst open, and it will elongate really fast. So essentially the tree will do what we were doing here, but does it within the bark of its little, and it'll put like 2 or 3 of them right on the top, and one of them will be the one that jumps up and becomes the next year's growth. Yep. Oh, thank you. So your question is, if you have them in your house, then what you need to do is every day you need to start turning back the lights. And then that will trick the tree to stop doing terminal growth, and we'll start putting on the lateral growth, and then start the bud formation thing. And then essentially, then you at some point in time in August, you can probably bring them outdoors because now you're going to be getting cooler temperatures and you're going to start to temper them. And you're going to put them back in that mode of, okay, winter's coming, and then naturally, because you don't want to start moving the trees into the nurseries. Actually, commercial nurseries actually take the trees and at some point in time they sync them to the daylight's time frame that's naturally going on. So the tree just moves right into the rhythm of life, or the whole cicadic, is that right? Cicadic rhythm. I think that's the right word. So then you can store them when it goes dormant, and then plant them the next. Or you can plant them and kind of, as long as you want to put them in sync with what's going on. But that's good. I'm glad you asked that. If these trees do not put buds on, the following year they may not survive, because there is no there's no growth that's going to be coming from them. And then, so it'll live for 1 year, but now is it going to put on another bud? And that's, chances are it probably won't. So, yeah, Dave?
I have two questions. One, does this book go through most of what you're telling us?
I'm going through a lot more in it,
Okay.
right? And there's, but they talk about lighting. They talk about, you can pass it around, by the way. It shows you how to collect seed. Here, pass it around.
So my second question, you talked about gathering once the snow melts, but then you also talked about a 6-month time frame to get them 6 inches. And
Right.
if you start this spring, you're not going to be planting in July.
Right. You're not going to be planting in July. So what you're probably going to do if you start then is that you're going to have a smaller tree. And then you can take those and then put them outdoors and then put them in the rhythm. And then you can take your container. We have a bunch of these that we did at the Watershed Forum office. And you take your cells and just bury the cells in your garden and cover them in snow. And then they'll be ready for growth the following spring. And then you can put them out, and then you can pull them out and transplant them. So that's ideally commercial nurseries sowed all of their seeds like in January. It's usually the second week of January they sow them.
So if one was going to harvest seed this year and start in next winter, how do you those seeds over winter until you start them in the middle of winter?
Put them in the freezer.
Okay.
And take them out every so often. You know, when it rains outside in the middle of the winter, take your seedlings out. I mean, they really like that stratification. And that's all based on they will break dormancy, but you want them primed. You want them ready to be breaking the final dormancy when they have a continuous period of heat and sunlight. So I wonder if you can relate this to salmon or not. But I don't know. Yeah, you don't want them breeding early, I guess. Yeah, but there's always some stupid salmon that comes up 2 years early. Kind of. Hopefully the eagles get it. So. Yeah.
So are we learning all about this because we're not gonna get any seedlings? I thought we were
Okay.
gonna be able to get like 20,000 seeds.
Oh yeah. We have seedlings are showing up somewhere.
Oh, they are, okay, good.
Yeah, I have a couple of thousand at the house that I'm holding over. So that's how you grow them. Now, Penny made a comment about this. And Dave about if I didn't get my seed. So you got an eraser, Dave? Or I can grab something. Piece of paper towel. Oh.
So Mitch, is there,
Oh.
is there a lack of seed?
Oh, okay, that's all right. Okay, all right.
Mitch, is there a lack of availability of seeds right now? Is it difficult to get them? Because I spoke with somebody, and thank you for all this information.
Yeah.
I did not know this, but I spoke with somebody and potentially there might be some grant money and to purchase seeds, this was put in for a couple of different, community entities. And so, if we wait if we work with the students in the schools, like we talked about.
Yep.
And educate the students, we would have to purchase seeds this year to plant them this year, because you couldn't educate fifth graders and have them go on to another class or another school.
Right.
And have
Yeah.
them not have that fulfillment, so we should start trying to plant some seeds now for next year. And then there'd be another avenue that we might take that would allow us to do some things this year. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. For this year, we can go dig up trees and
And that too.
yeah. That's digging up trees. So what you can do now, and this is why I don't do anything with seeds anymore, because it's just I don't want to deal with this. I mean, it's fun, but I rather grow tomatoes, beans, peppers. And I do still kind of do some with seeds. So what I do is I do the same thing. I have my cells, and I prep them all. Right, I do about 60 of them. 3 trays I have, and I fill them up with. And then I have this wonderful thing called my gravel driveway. And I go out there with a small trowel, and I get on my hands and knees, and I go find 1-year-old seedlings that are this big. And I go there with my little pan, and I do again, I think it's really sad. It's like picking berries, but you're picking trees. And I will get 70, I'll get 100 seedlings, and they're all about this big. And I dig them up, and you can get all of the soil, by the way, because at that point, the root's only this big, and they only go that big. And I get 60, and I come in here, and I notch this. And I have my little tiny seedling sometimes I'll see 3 roots. And this is actually a big one. In reality, they're that big. They're 1 inch tall, and they've got 2 inches of roots. And I can pick those to my heart's content. And I put them all in there, and then I put them in here. And then I gently press them on the side. And then now I have a tree that's 1 inch tall, and I just jump into the greenhouse with them. And I will grow those to 6 inches by July, because
It's a lot more sensible than.
Yeah,
seed.
well, I got to start. Maybe this is the way that I should have started with this, but that's kind of the. And then you don't have to worry about the seed mortality, and if it's good seed or if it's bad seed. I can tell you when you get these, you can't really tell the difference between white spruce and black spruce until about the 2nd year. But a tree is a tree as far as I'm concerned. So so that is the other way to do that, and you pick them, and you need to do them. Not pick them one day and then plant them. You got to pick them on the same day, and keep them covered. And then if you have and then you got them. And then you just, and then you grow them, and put 2 in there if you want. And it's easier to, because they're not going to live on your driveway. They might do 1 year. They typically don't. The ground's too hard. It's compacted. The gravel is nice because it's easier to pull them out of the gravel, because that's kind of what that little vermiculite thingy is. Okay. So, pretty easy. Now let's go a step forward. So what if you want to grow bigger trees? So you're going to plant these when the cone is full. But then you're probably still going to have a tree that's only that big. And in these, I've done birch with these, and I grew a birch about that tall. A 2-footer is really nice, and something about that size. Birch will grow really fast, and they don't fill up as much as the spruce do. So what you can do, and Ben has been talking about doing this, and that's why I said, Ben, you got to come over. And I wish I could have gotten to my greenhouse because I have a whole bunch of these things I'm going to show you. You can get them at Home Depot, and they're called tree bags. Take that one out of the. And a tree bag is a cloth bag, and it has a bottom, and it has a handle. And they're made out of, they call them Typar. It's not Typar, but they're made out of road fabric, erosion control fabric. And they're like $1 or $2 a piece. You can get them really big, and you can get them really small. You can get them about a quart size. And they're collapsible, and I think they're a couple of bucks, $1 a piece, $2 a piece. The bigger ones, I always thought somebody could sit there and go buy fleece at Joann's and start making them, but I just decided to go buy them. It was so much easier, and these are pretty thick. So what you do is you fill this up with soil, and you go dig yourself a pretty hefty seedling. And now you can, and if you, for a quart one, I'd go about 8 inches, maybe on a quart one, and a half-gallon one, you could go bigger, and you plant this in the get the right colored one here. It goes to here, and there's the soil, and there's the roots. And you do the same thing with this, is that you grow this to the point that the roots are starting to hit that plastic, that non-woven fabric, that polyester. I think they're all made out of polyester. And these are collapsible. And then you can put all that wonderful soil, or, because again, it's still, or you can do some natural soil. And then what you do is you take these into your garden. This is what I've usually got about 10 of these. And I dig a hole, and I put my bag in the hole. And then that way it saves on my watering, because water can flow out of that. So I have my trees planted in here. And then when it's time to plant, actually they've got the handles they're like double handles. They're looped handles. Sorry about that. It isn't a pail. It's not a pail. There's 2 loops here. Then the 2 loops are here, and you go grab them, and you pull them right up, and that tree comes right up. And then you should have a nice root mix in there. It should just be, and the roots will not jump through that. They don't like that polyester feel, I guess, or whatever, but you'll do it, and then you can transplant them. And then that way you can keep them in there 2 years, 3 years. Because the ground protects them in the wintertime, and you can keep them sheltered away from animals and critters and bunnies, and you can grow them to a really big size if you want. You can get these bags like 2 feet diameter, and nurseries do that now. When you buy some nursery stock, they'll grow them out, and you can put them in your car and you can drive around with them, and and that's kind of a cool way of doing that. So let me tell you a little bit about containers. So these are kind of hard to pull out. It's kind of single use because they're kind of fuzzy and the tree doesn't pull out really well. So oftentimes you'll end up taking some scissors and cutting them. So disposable society. So when you're using a container, and I'll use this, I'm glad that I got this, is if you notice this, you can pass it around, look at it. You notice this is cone shape, and it's kind of wider on the top and narrower in the middle. And you notice it's perfectly smooth. And that makes it, for when you pull them out, it's easier. You're not damaging them. Like these are horrible because they're ridged and they're wider in the middle. And I've toyed with making those, even though I have a whole bunch of them at the house. I was thinking of using PVC pipe. and cutting them to the right, and then just putting a little plug on the end, and you can have them. And then you can wire them together, or you could try to figure out a homemade 6-pack ring type of to hold them, or put them in a box that you could stack them so that they're all, and that you could do that. One that I thought would be really cool is, can I borrow your can?
Sure can.
Yeah, I promise to bring it back full. Is I always thought about using these and cutting the top off before that, and putting drainage holes in them, and that would be the perfect size to grow a tree that's about that big. So that's another thing, and they're smooth inside. So I was thinking about that. Plastic, thank you. And always looking for plastic if there's anything. But most plastic you could use, these are nice and smooth. I use these for other things, but I do tomatoes with these. What's nice about these is that you can see when the roots kind of get to them and they start filling it up. So, you can reuse a whole bunch of this, of that stuff for your planting containers.
Yeah, we have a large collection of it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Starting when we do our fruit tree stands.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So if you have a container that isn't necessarily transparent, does it harm the tree to like pull it out of that sleeve, check,
Yeah.
and put it back in?
Put it up, just kind of, if it doesn't, if you make sure the tree is watered, and then you let it dry out a little bit, and all potting soil expands when it's wet, and then it contracts a little bit, and then you'll be able to. But it's got to be a pretty good size. You got to start looking at it and you just grab and hold it, and you grab it. And if you notice that when you pull it, it's not sliding, but it's pulling the roots, then you know it's not, without even looking at it. But when you start doing that, and you notice you kind of wiggle them a little bit, and you can see they're coming out, you're getting closer. And then then you check, and if you're doing all the trees at the same time, then you know you don't have to pull every tree out. You know they're all kind of developing at the same rate. So.
Well, I was encouraged earlier, Mitch, when you said that the sign of a master gardener is killing plants. In the interest of doing some tree autopsies that you mentioned, I have some.
Oh, I have some dead trees. Okay.
So these we planted at the beginning of winter.
Mm-hmm.
Had a kind of a demo.
Okay.
So I think the soil
Yeah.
is probably wrong.
Right. Yeah.
What else did we do wrong there?
Yep. They're a lot. They're really dead. These are really dead.
Yeah.
And then you can. Yeah. And the bud, if you can break the bud and it's brown inside, then it's really dead. I think what.
Done a lot of hope for it.
Yeah. See, that's the thing about using native soil. And I think I think that's where, when you're doing containerized growing, it would be, you could take native soil, and I think you can mix some vermiculite in it and something to make it more, the porosity is much better. The other thing, this is a pretty big tree to transplant. Yeah, so that's kind of big for that, and you probably cut. The tree probably lost maybe half of its root mass, and that's kind of. So I wouldn't have put anything this big for that long. I would have probably gone smaller. That would have. And this tree is 1 year old here. If you can see this, look at that. You can tell here's the root collar. And you see this. That means that that root didn't penetrate the soil, so that seed germinated and it started going sideways, and then it found a place to go down. This might have been in gravel, and then it grew for 1 year right there, and then the second year was here. That's a 2 year, and that's a 3 year to here. And you can tell by where you have complete whorls. So this is 3 years old. The top got nicked off. That's 4 years old. That's 5 years old. This is 6. So this was like a 6-year-old tree. But it didn't help that the top got. And this is kind of cool. I'll come over on this side, but you'll see this branch here. See this branch? This lost its top, and a side branch decided to become the terminal. So if you see that, there's that this tree had the top cut off of it, eaten off of it.
Okay.
And so what happened was these were all the branches, and this branch decided to take the lead,
Oh, yeah.
and then became the terminal leader.
And this is the root you were talking about?
Yep, the root that kind of started as a, and it found its way down.
Hmm.
Does it look like the soil is real compact?
Is that the soil in
Yeah,
there?
it's pretty.
Yeah, that's soil from out on Funny River.
Yeah.
See,
Yep.
Yeah.
if you put sphagnum with the vermiculite or the perlite, that would that actually even make a better soil?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Sphagnum and-
Yeah. Usually that you'll buy some of that potting mix, and they say it's super great, but most potting soil doesn't have any nutrients in it. And this is kind of one of those funky things. What did Dorothy say? This isn't Kansas anymore. Is it? Is that? Yeah. Our soils here are very young. They're 8,000 years old. You get down to Kansas, and the soils are 12, 15,000 years old. They're twice as old. And our soils are right here, and the layer is about that. And then the rest of this is what the glacier left us. This goes all the way down to feet and feet and feet. So the only soil development we have here is that thin layer and then the rest of this, if you ever look at it, it's all the same color. And then when you it's all the same color, then it gets to a grayer color. And that gray is no oxygen. And this got oxidized, and the rust, the browns came out. But it's that little tiny layer, and that seedling, its roots are right in that layer. And its roots may extend here a little bit, but it's looking for water. But its feeders are up at that thin, and that's the soil that we have here. It's not like Kansas, which had the Great Plains. I don't know if Kansas. I'm not from Kansas, so but I know Dorothy was. But you had soil development that went down feet and feet, and that's why if you're ever in Chicago, you got to look. If they're putting a new sewer line, go just run over to it and go look at this new sewer line in Chicago and look at 3 feet of what we would call excellent gardening soil. Because you see it in Chicago, because they didn't farm it forever. If you went outside in Illinois, they've reduced that 3 feet, by the way. I used to work with soil scientists. They'd say, if you ever see a hole being dug in the Midwest, go look at it. You're going to be amazed. So anyway, so what we had here, I think, in Ben's tree is that in that transplanting, and here you had some leaf moss and all those detritus that's in there, and the twigs and the moose poop that's over there, right? That is the nutrients that are feeding that tree. And when we transplant, we have to be looking at that we're bringing some soil in with us, so that tree can continue to live in that little microorganism thing. It's kind of, right, we can talk about the critters that are in here, by the way. I tell everybody, this is David Haskell wrote a wonderful book called The Forest Unseen. And he's a forestry, not a forester, but he's an ecology professor. And he holds in his hand a handful of soil from Tennessee, and it says, "In my hand, there are 7 billion organisms." Right? Here, we probably don't have that many. 7 billion is what is that the population of the world right now? Maybe it's 8. 8. So anyway, but it's the idea that they got much better soil in Tennessee. That's where he teaches, University of. But that's where all of our nutrients are. They're in the organisms that are living here, and they're.
So would Ben have been had more luck if he just transplanted it right into a hole in the ground?
And put some of that soil that was in your hole and took this part out, saved it, planted the tree, then put that back on top. and with any soil, especially up at that root collar, because that's where the tree's feeding. And then you can also help it out by, when you transplant, when you do this here, that you add some fertilizer to it. And it's not the nicest thing in the world, but Miracle Grow is a Miracle Grow. It's you mix it really light and you water your trees. And that's one of the things I tell everybody when you're doing tree nurseries. Even though you have fertilizer in your mix, you should always be putting a very light concentration of that soluble nitrogen fertilizer in it, because the tree will. And I didn't believe it, but an agronomist told me, how they tell you to spray your foliage, that with Miracle Grow, and the plant will absorb nutrients, and the plants do absorb nutrients through their tissues. I didn't believe it, but I don't like Miracle Grow, but anyway, but I use it.
Can I ask a tree transplant question? I've seen these videos where they come along to like a willow tree and make a little cut in the, kind of the end of a branch. They make a little slit and then wrap a container around it and keep it, and come back. I don't know, a month or 2 or 3. I actually don't know how long. Sometime later, and that tree has like put roots out in that container that's wrapped around the incision, and then they can just clip it off and plop it right in the earth, and it's like, and you can do like willows have tons of branches, so you can do dozens and not damage the tree at all.
So you have this, and what you're doing is you take a little cat, right? You just make some nicks on it, and wrap it with sphagnum or whatever,
Even a water bottle that you just cut in half and wrap the tape.
Wrap the tape, and then the willow leaves. This will form roots, and that will happen. You could also take the branch and put it in a bucket of water with 20 other branches. Go buy this little packet of pixie dust called rooting hormone, but willow really doesn't need rooting hormone. And then you put it there, and then you will see roots forming on your. And then if you do it in the spring, you can take just as soon as the pussy willows kind of start up, go take those and stick them in the ground. And you're not going to get 100% survival, but you're going to get a lot of survival as long as it's moist. And then the other part when you do that is whatever you put in the ground, you have to, rule of thumb, there's a lot of rules of thumb, is if it's 8 inches in the ground, just leave 4 inches on top or 6 inches on top. You can't have 8 inches in the ground and 3 feet on top, because it's just, the tree is just going to be, it won't have enough capacity to the. And if you're really into killing trees, this is really, really cool, is I'm going to do that this year. But you take some willow sticks, and willows have they have the ability to form roots everywhere. Right, as opposed to, so the cells are triggered, and when they're cut, they're trampled, they tend to sprout, is take some, what are those funky plants you hang from your baskets? Geraniums, right? Put geranium cuttings, I could do it, talking to Master Gardener class here, and throw willow branches in there, and mix willow branches and geranium cuttings together, and the chemical that's in the willows are going to trigger the geraniums to form roots. And that's an old timer instead of buying rooting hormone, you can use the natural willow ability to sprout. So I'm going to give it a try. I've got some geraniums that but you can do that. I saw them doing it with apples. I saw a YouTube video. I just found out about YouTube videos. You want to dismantle an atomic bomb? There's a YouTube video that shows you how to dismantle an atomic bomb. It's just So, right, and then the other thing is we were talking about transplanting bigger trees, and I tell everybody, it says, get the soil. I mean, that's the important part in getting the soil. And we're going to do one again this spring on transplanting. We're going to go to somebody's lot, I guess. We got a couple of folks that are willing to let us go there. And you take your shovel, and again, it's the same thing as what I was showing you with the here's your tree. That's pretty big. You have your roots. And you go with your shovel and you slice here and you slice here and you slice there and you slice there. Here's a shovel. There's the shovel this way. And you do it in the front and you make a big circle and you pull this thing out and you have this lump of soil with roots in it. This stuff will break off around 6 inches, maybe even more. This will just fall out. And then you go take this, tender loving care, protect it, and bring it to your planting site and try to keep that whole little system going. And that's the now, if you don't, okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I did this with a bunch of large trees. Me and one of my mentors, we planted about 3,000 large trees 20 years ago with Professor John Alden.
Yep. Yep.
I know. And most of them survived. They were real slow for a long time, but then they survived, and they're super taken off now.
Oh.
But I moved around maybe a dozen when they were just
Mm-hmm.
2 or 2.5
Yeah.
feet tall, and it's same technique. And I used a bag.
Yeah.
I wrapped them in a bag to transport them to save as much soil as I could.
Excellent. That's
But now I would still love to move more because I had a Forest Service ranger, I guess, or guy. I think it's ranger.
a guy. It could be a gal too, by the way. But
Yeah.
that's-
And he came out and said that so many have survived, so more than we thought would survive, that we just planted them too close, and now they're 20 years old, but he thinks that they're gonna, he told me to cut,
Mhm.
go along and cut every other one.
Yeah.
We only expected that many to survive anyways, and now because they're all between 8 and 12 feet tall, 8 and 15 feet
Yeah.
tall. And is there any way to move a tree that big?
You can move them. Go to YouTube.
Okay.
I haven't seen it, but I went to overseas. There's something called Kew Gardens. I don't know if you've ever been to Kew Gardens. Is just this. I went there before the hurricane wiped it out. Not wiped out. It's a big botanical garden in London, which is really, you've been there, yeah. You can go there and see the trees that Captain James Cook brought with him from his Pacific Northwest, and he brought samples of trees to Kew Gardens, which was really, I mean, that's kind of, and these trees are big, right? So it shows you what time, if you have a lot of time, you can.
There's another place, the Arnold Arboretum outside of Cambridge.
Okay, yeah.
In Jamaica Plain, actually, is just, we went last year. I hadn't been since I was like in fifth grade. But it was, I never saw trees like that in my whole life.
Yeah. And, not to, but we could do this here. The problem is that we have to have a 200-year time frame and what it's going to look like. I mean, arboretums are all over the U.S. There's a National Arboretum in Washington. There's an arboretum at Fairbanks, right, Ben? Yeah, some John Alden that you were talking about. The things in their little mini things that John Alden planted. John was a geneticist that worked in Fairbanks and wrote a lot of wonderful papers about tree genetics. So your question is, how big? Is how much equipment do you have? And that's what it comes down to. And at Kew, they were moving full-size, they have pictures. They have a model of one. This was 25, 30 years, it was 35 years ago I was there. They have the model of the equipment they used to move a full-size oak tree. And they have photos of people with shovels digging 6 feet down over a 8-foot disc and then moving this horse carriage thing with the straps and the undercut and slide. I mean, they have that piece of equipment was there, and I thought, wow, they had a lot of time on there. They did not have YouTube to keep themselves busy. This is not, but with enough time and money, I mean, they had time, but you can move them. It's just, and we were talking earlier about there's some tree spades, and Dave was talking about, is there something you can attach to a tractor? And it's essentially, they're shovels, and they're hydraulically used, and they slide in, and you push a little lever, and it each one is independent, and then you flip another lever, and then it tweaks them a little bit, and then you push another one, then it lifts it up. And I mean, you're looking at a very expensive piece of equipment, but if you're running a big landscaping nursery, I think forestry, and I think planting 1,000 trees is great, but for the cost of planting those thousands is probably the same as moving a big tree, or just one big tree. So it's a.
Is there any invasive trees people should not plant?
Yes, there is. Great question. Wrong person to ask it to, because I'll tell you exactly which ones you shouldn't plant. The one you shouldn't plant immediately is the Mayday tree. Yeah, and that's the Mayday tree, the bird cherry tree. They all go by different names. Prunus pedaeus is the Prunus is cherry, and pedaeus is the one. There's also Prunus virginiana, and I think Soldotna is the bird cherry capital of Alaska. It's the folks at, I think it was it Mora that started doing it? Yeah, there was somebody at Kenai Watershed Forum started a bird cherry survey to locate and I think they were doing it on bicycle or something, and every time they saw a bird cherry in the city of Soldotna, they would kind of locate it. And they did it for like a week or so, and they stopped doing it because they were everywhere. And to say that, could we locate where all the bird cherries are, it didn't really make a difference. They're everywhere. And the reason they're not a great tree is, number one, they're exotic. So exotic is pretty good. I like corn, I like tomatoes, I like bell peppers. These are all, and if you've ever lived in the lower 48, tomatilias, the little wonderful, they're invasive. They go everywhere. I mean, once you get them in your garden, but it's like weeding tomato plants. You don't feel really bad about weeding your tomato plants. But they're prolific. They put out little tiny cherries, which some people think they can make wonderful wine out of them, but I don't think so. The birds take these seeds, they eat them, they go fly over to the next roosting place. The droppings hit the soil, and they're always tipping. And next thing you know, you're walking on Soldotna Creek, and you find bird cherry growing on the banks of Soldotna Creek. And nobody planted them, and they came from somewhere. And they're beautiful, and the moose don't eat them, which is another thing. Which is the moose do not eat them, and they also reproduce by runners. The tree will be here. Evil tree. Little skull and crossbones here. You cut them down, and those roots will send suckers up. And if you go to Valley of the Moon Park in Anchorage, I think it's called Valley of the Moon, the Japanese or the Chinese were very sad about the earthquake and donated bird cherry trees to us.
They are beautiful. They smell so good, and I know what you mean, though, and the birds do love them. That's where I get my bird food that comes every year.
And
we're cutting it. We're going to take it down.
yeah, and I hate to say the word herbicide, but I need to work on my skull and crossbones a little bit. But it's a very good use of some chemicals that most people don't feel comfortable with, but I think it's worth every penny you put into spraying them. But that's
But if you live near the river, that would not be a good idea, probably.
not really. It's if it's done proper use of herbicides is it dries fairly quickly. You want to avoid spraying herbicides within, if you know if it's going to rain in the next 12 hours. You have to read the label, but they'll say, and then it's and it's really herbicides. Roundup that's the one they use for it. Isn't really too toxic for fish, has it, Ben? Ben's my fish guy, so.
It has a shorter half-life than, or it doesn't, once it leaves the sprayer, it doesn't stick around for much longer than like 12 hours, even if it rains. So it's a chemical of concern, but it's mostly like if you were exposed to it every single day, then it would be of concern. If it's like you use it once a summer or a couple times in your life, it's not going to show up on the radar.
Yep.
In terms of health concerns or environmental concerns.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you would want to take precautions, of course. You use gloves, and if you have a mask, we all have a pile of masks lying around here.
Yeah, we all have masks. And it's interesting, Alaska, it photo degrades. One of and there hasn't been a lot of research about photo degradation in Alaska, because if it stays light for 18 hours, is that the same as being, does it degrade quicker? And yeah, Monsanto hasn't decided not to. They haven't decided to invest any money in research in Alaska, but it's